President Muhammadu Buhari has signed a bill for the removal of prison from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent list. The primary objective of the constitutional amendment was to remedy the overcrowding of the nation's custodial centers resulting from a high number of pretrial detentions, arbitrary arrests, jailbreaks, amongst others. On Thursday, the Minister of Interior said the federal government will no longer be responsible for correctional management of state offenders, urging state government to build and manage their own custodial facilities as empowered in the newly amended Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019. Speaking to Galaxy TV News, this public affairs analyst say this development will encourage crime as state governments are not financially viable to address the imminent challenges the move poses.
With the dwindling economy, with the resources, unavailability of resources, will they be able to finance this? These are the issues. The states are not buoyant enough to shoulder this. I understand this is coming up because it's now been removed from the exclusive list to the concurrent. But these are the issues. Do they have the financial wherewithal to do this? And the answer is no. So for me, it's going to encourage criminality because they know at the end of the day they're going to be asked to pay fines instead of being put in correctional centers.
Where do you think the state government will get that money? Even if they have that money, do you think they will be sincerely spend it in that area? Even in the first place, if government, federal government, in their own wisdom have decided to say, okay, the way we are giving you people security force, which has not been able to yield any fruitful result, that is a matter of collecting it and pocket it without achieving anything. The same thing would have happened to that sector, even if federal government decide to give them certain amount of money, that is to each state, so that we can facilitate that sector and achieve desired results. Now we are saying they should come up with their own, finance it, maintain it. We don't need to deceive ourselves at this rate, at this stage.
I think the federal government should not shy away from their responsibility, in the sense that federal government is a father of all, and even though if they want to do this thing to states, I will first ask them this question: are they going to make a special allocation on this to the state government, or they want to put the financial aspect too on the state purse?
What then is the way out?
The way out is for government to still find a way of partnering with the state government. Now that we know it's on the concurrent list, they could make arrangements in such a way they say, okay, maybe 70-30, the federal government contributes 70, the states will contribute 30. That makes more sense than asking the states that are already financially handicapped to shoulder the responsibility of building correctional centers.
I want to advise, this is the right step, but should not be taken the wrong time. So it's the right thing, but we have to learn how to do the right thing at the right time. Otherwise, we will begin to breed more criminals in this country. They have to tread with caution. This issue requires holistic examination, deliberation, collaboration between the federal government, state government, all stakeholders, and all opinion leaders. So if it will materialize at all, it shouldn't be an issue we should jump to in a hurry.
Nigeria presently has 244 custodial centers, with the bulk of them being in the state capitals. How many more can the nation afford in its quest to decongest the custodial centers? Only time will tell.
Indeed, only time will tell. And we have to say this. It was the federal government disclosed that they have 75,507 inmates. And shockingly, 52,436 of them are waiting trial. This is around 80% of them. And since this is something you specialize in, it makes one wonder, what could be the cause of this? Is it that the judiciary is not taking this as seriously as it should be?
It's not one factor that is responsible for this. In the past, we have had time and have had cause to examine the entire system from arrest. The congestion starts from the day a person is arrested, if you want to look at it very critically or objectively. What do I mean? When a person is arrested for a crime, there is a procedure to elicit statements from him, gather the evidence, and then take him to the courts, where you cannot deal with it outside of the court. Lagos State has all these other options where people can settle, even though there are criminal issues, can settle with the victim, depending on the level of the crime. These petty issues can be settled, and the matter will not be charged to court by the police. That has started the congestion already. But congestion, like I said, starts from that point. Why? If these important pieces of evidence are not collated and put together by the police or the arresting organization, it's going to impact negatively on the trial when the time comes. Because this is the factor that gives rise to the delay, whereby the prosecution is not able to present the witnesses when the time comes. This is a major factor that has given rise to delay in criminal justice adjudication. And whenever there is delay, you see a lot of people going into the facilities, the prisons, and few people coming out. At the end of the day, you see congestion, bloating of these facilities. So if we begin from the scratch, which is at the point of arrest, gather your evidence, take the person to court. Now in court, the presiding judicial officer, whether at the magistrate court level or at the high court level, these are courts of trial, I have to weigh the situation critically and know, should I give bail? Most of these offenses are bailable. And then the next point is, what are the conditions for that bail? I read also in the minister's statement that there are about 4,000 inmates, more than 4,000, about 4,700 inmates of prisons in Nigeria who are there because they are unable to pay fines of 1 million naira and below. Some of the time, you see this inability, not in sentence or fine, but also in being able to gather resources to bail the defendant. And if the person cannot meet up with the bail conditions, it's going to add to the number of the people in there. Not all of them there are able to perfect the bail conditions given to them. But the presiding judicial officer has to balance the interest of the state, the victim, and the defendant. It's a three-way course. If I give him bail on very liberal terms so that it will be like no condition, the person can come out and jump bail, breach the terms of the bail, and when the next date for court attendance comes, he's nowhere to be found. The prosecutor will now say, I apply that his bail be revoked. That is a possibility, and that's what we see every day. So you look at it from that point of arrest to the point where he's brought to court and bail is given or not given, or given with such conditions that he's not able to meet up. All these are putting pressure on the correctional facilities. We now move to trial proper. You go to court some days, you don't see the judge or the magistrate in court. So they bring the defendants from prisons, they take them back. Their next day will be a month or 2 months after. While this is going on, so many new people are being arrested and charged to court, and court remands them in these custodies. The number keeps increasing. Now, to come to court, the magistrate or the judge is in court, but the prosecution is not able to bring the witnesses that will give support to whatever charge is laid against the defendant. An adjournment is taken again. And you don't expect the magistrate sometimes to immediately strike out the case. The magistrate will have to weigh how many times the prosecution has asked for adjournment vis-a-vis the nature of the case and whether the person is in custody or not. He has to balance these things. Then you give an adjournment. The next adjournment, maybe the prosecution will say again, we don't have a witness in court. That's another possibility. Or there is a witness in court, but he cannot give evidence to the end. So he could give evidence halfway, and it will take another 1 year for him to come back. It said the police, for example, will say he has been posted out of station. Between when that offense was committed and now that the trial is on, some time has passed. This officer is no more resident in this area. So we have to get him from wherever he is. It has happened in several cases, not only police, EFCC, and so many others. These are the causes for delay. Sometimes after the prosecution case, you see delay by the defense lawyers too. Then some days, everybody is in court, but the defendants are not brought to court. And the correctional services will say, our vehicle is not in order. So you keep seeing a case that ordinarily should be dealt with and closed within 6 months, span over 3 years. We have instances where criminal cases have lasted 5 years. Even with the Administration of Criminal Justice Act that has provided for how cases should be adjourned timeously and unnecessary adjournments will not be taken. In practice, you still see these adjournments going on. That's for the federal laws. The ACJA has been implemented by states in their various laws in different states, about 20 states. Yet we still see the same problem of congestion. So the criminal justice system is the issue. It's a system. Okay, look at the issue of those who are remanded and are waiting for the DPP's legal advice. These are offenses that the magistrate court cannot try. The offenses that can be tried by information. You get to see that up till now, for example, my organization or the organization I represent, early this year we released 4 people from the Medium Correctional Center here in Lagos, Kirikiri, who had stayed about 9 years each, awaiting DPP's advice. You know, they call them awaiting trial as a group. But among them, there are those whose cases are going on, who are really on trial. The prosecution has opened their case at the High Court, at the Magistrate Court. They are not on bail. But there is this group who are waiting for the DPP to issue legal advice to know whether they really should be tried or not. So they don't even know whether they are going to be tried. So we have this group, and these are the group. This is the group that you see that causes this group have issues around them. A person is staying 10 years. We still have, in one other application we have now pending in the courts, a group of people who have stayed 12 and 11 years.
All still awaiting trial.
All awaiting trial. So they don't, this group is unique, and we want to see them from that very sensitive angle, both in the terms of their mental health, having had to stay 10 years on one spot and not go to court any day, and not even being put on trial because they don't know whether they will eventually be put on trial. Most of the time, you see that their case files are no more existing. The ones we released, the DPP's reply to the courts when we served the application was that they are not in receipt of the files from the police. The judge of the courts had no other option than to get them released. 9 years.
Let us even talk about capital punishments, because according to this statement by the federal government, there are about 3,000 people that have already been sentenced, have already been convicted to death. But how come these people are still in prison? And how does this execution thing take place? Is it that they don't just do it all at once and then they leave them there? Or it's just maybe they give them capital punishment, but then they don't execute the capital punishment, they still just keep them around? Because 3,000 is still a large number of people. Although it's not like one is advocating for their death, yes, but that is also something that should be looked into.
Right. It's also it weighs on the mind of the convict too, that every passing day
might be their last.
He's looking out whether the hangman will knock on his door, and then that will be the day. So a day stretches to a week, to a month, to a year, and some of them have stayed over 10 years awaiting they are awaiting execution now. That's the condemned convicts, as they are called. The challenge in this system really is that most state governors for the state laws, where those convicted under the various state laws. Most state governors are very unwilling to sign the execution warrants. That is the truth. So many of them leave it for their successors. Those ones leave it for their successors. And these convicts keep staying. But after 10 years on the death row, the person can qualify for prerogative of mercy, whereby the chief judge working with other stakeholders can commute that death penalty to life imprisonment. But of course, it's a prerogative, a thing of prerogative. It's not as of right. So from time to time, we have seen that also take place because so many organizations are working against the death penalty as being not strong or sufficient enough to deal with whatever crime that you think you will deal with. Nigeria is part of those countries, few countries who still retain the death penalty in their law books. But the sociologists, the other aspects of a social scientists will ask that question, the criminologists, is the death penalty works to reduce crime over the years. Statistics out there. Do you think the death penalty, the fact that armed robbery, if a person is found guilty of armed robbery, is going to be sentenced to death, has that knowledge weighed on people's minds and reduced armed robbery? That's a question.
Or could we say that because they know that they might get to prison and maybe the person they are working for might actually come to bail them? Could we say that that might be part of the reason why it does not? Because if we look at Amrabi's code of an eye for an eye, like you take someone's life, then your life should be taken too. Well, it's as if these criminals have this rest of mind that despite the fact that they might be caught, they would not die. Is there not also something that could be done for stuff like this? Because once the court has already sentenced this person to death, and then we still see these people still roaming around the street, perhaps not in that same location, but maybe in another location. Is that not something that is worth looking into?
Well, if a person is sentenced to death, he can't come out, that's one. But the issue of having the fear of the death penalty and how much that fear has weighed down on incidences of crime. That is something that we may not be able to exhaust if we look at it. A number of people know that this is the punishment, yet they go into it. And that calls to question what is the propelling force behind their engagement in these crimes. There are those of them, yes, who are involved in the crimes. There are those, if you go in there, they will tell you, yes, we committed the offenses for which we are here. Some rely on nothing to bring them out. Some feel that if they go, like you said, if we are arrested, our godfathers could help get us out at the police level. Okay, mainly before the matter is charged to court. Sometimes it's not true. Sometimes it's not true. They end up going in there because there is no godfather anywhere in the real sense. The person that they think they are working with denies them. Some of them are not working for anybody. Some tell you they are propelled because of hunger, but I don't believe that is true. Because you don't exert force on someone else for a problem that ordinarily he didn't cause to you. Armed robbery, stealing with the force of arms against someone, stealing from someone, okay, with the force of arms cannot be justified because the person you're stealing from has not in any way directly, done anything against you and is not responsible for your plight or state of being. So that answers that. Ordinarily, if you say the government is responsible for his plight, you turn your anger to the government. But who is the government in the real sense of it? The government officials are protected. So I wouldn't support that for any day, and I wouldn't have it justified on any platter whatsoever. It's a crime and it's wrong. That's the truth. But coming into what you said earlier about congestion, and the clip you also played about the Minister of Interior, I'm mentioning that the federal government will stop the funding of inmates come December 31 this year. That's something that calls for concern.
Because the question itself is, who should be taking care of the prisoners? The federal government or the state government? Because as you said earlier, some state governments even hesitate to sign this death penalty for people who are awaiting that?
Yes. Now, the Nigerian Correctional Service is a federal government agency headed by a Controller General. That is purely federal. The Minister of Interior could say this just because recently the President signed into law one of the bills. Of course, he signed 16 bills into law. One of them is the bill that is on devolution of corrections. Prior to that, prisons, imprisonment, corrections were on the exclusive legislative list. Corrections used to be an item on the exclusive legislative list. Only the federal government can legislate on it, build prisons, fund prisons, and all of that. But now, with this amendment, it's moved to the concurrent list. So the federal and the states can legislate on prisons. On the heels of this now, the Minister of Interior, who has less than 2 weeks to go, is now saying states have to begin to feed these people. After all, 90% of the inmates in our facilities committed state offenses that are tried by state prosecutions, DPPs, and all of that. Yes, that could, for me, it's a welcome development that prisons, corrections has been moved to that list. But to come out now immediately and say states should start the funding, how many states in Nigeria are viable in the real sense of being able to take care of prisoners? 22.4 billion is what the minister said will be spent this year. I tell you that even this humongous amount budgeted, you need to listen to tales of ex-inmates. The group we released early this year. When they came out, we had a briefing session with them, a debriefing session, so to say. And we touched on how their meals were. The description of what they ate is not something we can say on live television. He said it's not, even dogs could not eat that. Okay, is this the food you are budgeting 22 point something billion for? This I'm talking about Lagos State prisons, not Lagos owned prisons, but prisons located in Lagos State, yeah, which should be about the best of all in Nigeria, Abuja, Lagos, and perhaps Rivers, a couple. This is the real situation. The stories they told us represented what 99.9% of them experienced in terms of food. Where and how? Where does the money go? How is the money expended? That is a question for another day, but that's the truth. It's something that should be looked into. Now you are now moving this to states suddenly. I'm not saying it won't be worked out, but a situation where with a rule of thumb, but with just one statement in an occasion, he went to attend in Imo State, now said that the federal government will stop feeding. I thought that the minister could do better. Of course, he's leaving office soon, but in his handover notes, he should bring up these suggestions for the next person. What do I mean? A joint committee of the federal government and the states should come together and look at this. You are going to be having a dual regime. The facilities will be run by the federal government, the staff, federal government staff, feeding states. And this is what you're proposing. The states have to know who are in these prisons, who are our inmates. You said 90% of them are states, which means federal government has some inmates who are on federal offenses, like the NDLEA is a federal offense. The customs and excise, federal offense. Some, NAFDAC.
Which is on the rise day by day.
On the rise day by the EFCC. All these are offenses run by the federal, prosecuted. All these organizations also have people that they prosecute and who are serving.
Yeah, I sincerely wish we could go on and on, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Many, many thanks for sharing your view with us on the show. We truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here always.
And that's Ben Abraham, a legal practitioner and founder of Zarephath Aid. It is indeed my pleasure to have been on the show with you today. Please do join us same time, same station next week. My name is Yuri Babi Salako. Do have a wonderful week ahead.